Good evening. Thank you for watching. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. So this is part 3 of my review and discussion of this book titled There is a God by Anthony Flew. Please refer to parts 1 and 2 for more details on the preface and introduction of this book. Anthony Flew, as I mentioned in part 2, examines 3 main phenomena of nature, which to him and based on his classical philosophical reasoning point conclusively to the fact that there is a God. Number 1 is the fact is that there are laws that govern everything in nature. Number 2 is life, and that there are intelligently organized and purpose-driven beings. And number 3, that there is a nature to start with, that there is something, that there is a universe to start with, that there is something rather than nothing, and that the universe is the way it is, that this universe is governed by laws, because those laws indicate that there's a lawmaker, that there's a mind, that there's an intelligence, that there is a wise power that set everything in order in an organized fashion, and that allowed everything to go in harmony with each other, so as to allow for this universe to exist in the first place, and to continue to exist, and to allow for it to progress, and eventually for life to emerge on this earth, and then to allow for intelligent beings, human beings, to also exist on this earth and continue to exist in this very harsh environment of the universe. There is this safe haven on this earth, which is not even the size of a particle of dust floating in the air compared to the size of the universe. If you compare the size of this earth to the size of the universe, it is almost like nothing, a small speck floating in the air compared to this universe. And that's not really a real comparison, because the earth is much smaller than that. But still, God allowed for this safe haven on this small speck in this floating in this universe to have all the conditions to allow for life to exist and to start and to flourish and to remain and to persist, and for life to progress, and for human beings to emerge as well. So these are really very interesting phenomena that we have to ponder upon. Where did all this come from? Laws indicate that there is a certain mind and wisdom and power and intelligence that is exerting the same governing force on each and every single particle and atomic particle of this universe. That he has a power and will and control and ability to do so. Anthony Flew says here, over the last 2 decades, my whole framework of thought has been in a state of migration. This was a consequence of my continuing assessment of the evidence of nature. So as more evidence emerged from nature and scientific discoveries, Anthony Flew basically used this evidence within the same framework of classical philosophical arguments to reach this conclusion. It says, when I finally came to recognize the existence of a God, it was not a paradigm shift, because my paradigm remained the same. And he states this paradigm and his philosophy in life, and this should be the philosophy of each one of us. And this is exactly what Plato stated in his book Republic, the Republic, and he basically quotes Socrates on this. These are some of the greatest philosophers of human history. They both say we must follow the argument wherever it leads. If you want to reach the truth, you should not be biased. You should not have fixed presuppositions that you try to support using twisted arguments. No, you should free your mind from all these presuppositions and from all this dogma, and you should look at the evidence and see where it leads you. If you do that, then you will reach the right conclusion. Then Anthony Flew makes a very important point. He says, are we engaging here in science or philosophy? Then he clearly states that he's engaging in both. He's a philosopher, he's not a scientist, but the scientists have shown us and told us about their discoveries and observations and conclusions. We use this raw material we utilize this raw material in our logical reasoning, which every human being with intellect is endowed with. We use this to reach this conclusion. So to reach a belief in God, God is not a material thing that you can see or touch or feel, or you can directly hear or even smell. You cannot use your senses to directly see God. You will have to look at the evidence, the material evidence, the scientific evidence, and use your logical reasoning. You should use your philosophy that each one of us has certain set of rules that we are born with, the laws of reasoning, the principles of logic that that are universal to all human beings. We utilize those to come to that conclusion. So basically it says, when you draw philosophical conclusions from scientific data, then you are thinking as a philosopher. You don't have to be a philosopher to use this logical reasoning, because every single human being knows these logical principles of reasoning, how to come to a conclusion from a set of premises or certain basic tenets that you know from the scientific facts that you are observing with your senses, how to use them to come to a certain conclusion. Every human being has this capability and this instinct that is ingrained within him. Then Antony Flew goes on to say, he says, the leaders of science over the last 100 years, along with some of today's most influential scientists, have built a philosophically compelling vision of a rational universe that sprang from a divine mind. As it happens, this is the particular view of the world that I now find to be the soundest philosophical explanation of a multitude of phenomena encountered by scientists and lay people alike. We reach the conclusion that there is a God not just from one observation. Every single experience you have in life, from the time you're born till the time you die, every single experience will lead you to this conclusion. If you look at anything, if you look at your hand, you see, who fashioned this hand in such a way, such a magnificent way that you can grasp with it, that you can hold with it, that you can utilize it for so many purposes. The movements of this hand are almost endless. The way that we use our hand every single day. Just imagine the life of somebody whose hands are not functioning or was born without a hand. How much grief he would have in his life. How much is it a blessing to have this hand? Who fashioned this hand? Who wanted you to have an easy life, a comfortable life? Who wanted you to be able to do whatever you want to do using this just one hand? Just the hand, your eyes. Everything around you tells you that someone created you. Someone wants you to be happy. Someone wants you to understand. Someone wants you to learn. So this is basically what Antony Flew is pointing to. Again, he mentions the 3 points that led him, or the 3 main phenomena: the laws of nature, the life on earth, and where did this universe come from. That these are the main 3 things he will be discussing in this book. Before I conclude this video, Antony Flew here talks about another philosopher. His name is David Conway, who published a book titled The Recovery of Wisdom. David Conway is a British philosopher at Middlesex University. This is very important, what David Conway states here. He says, the God whose existence is defended by Conway, Antony Flew says, the God whose existence is defended by Conway and by myself is the God of Aristotle. One of the biggest minds and philosophers of history, Aristotle. Aristotle, without using any kind of religious beliefs. He did not predicate his beliefs, which I will mention right now, on any kind of religious background or theistic background or theological argument. No, he used his mind to come to these conclusions, just pondering in the universe and analyzing the data that he extracts from these observations. What did Aristotle say? He says, in sum, to the being whom he considered to be the explanation of the world and its broad form, Aristotle ascribed the following attributes. Aristotle ascribed the following attributes to this creator who fashioned this world. He says, this creator has the following attributes: immutability, immateriality, omnipotence, omniscience, oneness or indivisibility, perfect goodness, and necessary existence. Conway then goes to say, there is an impressive correspondence between this set of attributes and those traditionally ascribed to God within the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I'd like to add that these same attributes are the attributes of God also in the Islamic faith as well. That God is one and that He is indivisible. That God is omnipotent, is capable of doing everything and anything. That God is omniscient, He knows everything. Nothing escapes His knowledge or His observation. That God is one. That there's nothing like God. Immutability. Immateriality, that God is not material, because this material, this whole universe that we live in only came into existence 13.8 billion years ago. Before that, there was nothing. No one can prove that there was anything prior to that. There was no space, there was no time, there was no energy, there was no matter. Suddenly everything came into being. Suddenly, and that's why they call it the Big Bang, because there was nothing before that. We don't have evidence of anything before that. Anthony Flew says, God created the world so as to bring into being a race of rational creatures, human beings. Conway believes, and I concur, that's what Anthony Flew says, and Conway believes, and I concur, that it is possible to learn of the existence and nature of this Aristotelian God by the exercise of unaided human reason. See, Aristotle, he reached these conclusions not through reading a religious book or any kind of revelation. No, he just used his mind. And Anthony Flew and Conway, and these are very big philosophers of our time, came to the same conclusion, that you can know the existence of God and His basic attributes just by observing this universe and this nature. Then finally, and I will conclude my video with this last quotation from Anthony Flew. He says, I must stress that my discovery of the divine has proceeded on a purely natural level, without any reference to supernatural phenomena. It has been an exercise in what is traditionally called natural theology. It has had no connection with any of the revealed religions, nor do I claim to have had any personal experience of God or any experience that may be called supernatural or miraculous. In short, my discovery of the divine has been a pilgrimage of reason and not of faith. Thank you for watching. I will conclude this video. Please follow the upcoming videos and please refer to the previous 2 parts of this series reviewing this book, There Is a God by Anthony Flew.